into the front of the statement. And then there's a wonderfully helpful website you might want to jot down in your notes somewhere. It's called, and believe me, the word "the" is actually in the website address. theconversationproject.org. theconversationproject.org. They've got booklets that are so helpful to everybody in getting conversations going. And they also have other booklets, you know, how to talk to your doctor, how to pick a healthcare agent. I mean, it is one of the best resources on the internet that I have ever seen. So anyway, getting back to this first handout about knowing your rights, because it is such a difficult topic to discuss, it's amazing some very basic information that people are not aware of. For example, the Federal Trade Commission put in place in the mid-1980s a law called the Funeral Rule. And a lot of what's on this page here comes from this funeral rule, but that's also what this booklet is. See? Shopping for funeral services. I order them literally 500 at a time, and they're free. The federal government wants people in our country to have some basic information about what their rights are when dealing with funeral homes. And look, if you'll open up right to the middle where the staple is, look at this. Ooh la la. The federal government is suggesting that we think about final arrangements before the day comes when we need to make them for someone that we're close to, or someone has to make them for us. Imagine that. Shop around. It is, and believe me, I spent a year selling cars, so I did, and I'll tell you what, it is exactly like buying a car. Okay. It is.
I feel so comforted.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about an extended warranty there.
Yeah, when I got a new air conditioner recently, and I'm almost 80 years old. And the guy that installed the air conditioner said, you know, I want to remind you, this has a 10-year warranty. And I said, in other words, for me, it's a lifetime warranty. So you know how it is with buying cars. You kind of get fixed. You want a certain car, right? And I mean, there's people that fall down to Houston and up to Dallas and car brokers and all kinds of places to get the lowest possible price. Well, believe it or not, why spend more money for the funeral arrangements that you would like to have than you need to? The first step is just deciding, you know, would you like to have a funeral before you're either cremated or buried? Or would you like to just go ahead, get that done, and have a memorial/life celebration service after? So you need to decide, first of all, what do you want? And then you start shopping around. And one of the things that makes it easier in our area is the fact that our wonderful group creates every year, this is a sample page, our funeral home price survey. Okay, we go out to over 50 funeral homes in the 5 counties that we serve. Okay, it's a landscape document, Rick. It looks like this. And if you don't have one, I'll give you one.
I have what I printed.
Okay,
It's a subset.
here you go. You printed it, portrait.
Okay, this is fine.
Okay,
I'm good.
come on, I'll have to take that home anyway. There you go. Okay, this is just a sample of the full survey, which you'll see up in the upper right-hand corner. It's available on our website. There's no charge for it. You just go out there. There's a big blue button on the home page. You can click on the big blue button. You'll go right to the survey and you print it. If you know how to print landscape, it'll look like this. And we have these different columns with different, like, okay, what's a direct cremation cost? And these are all the funeral homes in Bastrop, Caldwell, Hayes, Travis, and Williamson counties. Okay? And believe me, you start running your finger, let's just say you do want a direct cremation, which means no services prior to the cremation. Just cremate me and maybe the family will have a memorial service or something afterwards. 6 weeks afterwards. Who knows, 6 months afterwards when my birthday comes around, whatever. It gives people a chance to make travel arrangements and stuff. There's a lot to be said for those memorial services because they don't need to involve a funeral home at all. There's people that have them down at the South Padre Island on the beach. Or at the Rose Garden in Zilker, or in somebody's backyard, or in a hotel conference room. I mean, the possibilities are endless. Yeah, that's a broken bone. There's a natural. Okay, so when you get the full survey, you start running your finger down the direct cremation column, you'll find, guess what? There's a funeral provider here in Austin that will cremate you for $595. And you keep running your finger down that direct cremation column, go to the next page. Oh, look, here's a funeral home that charges over $4,000 for exactly the same thing.
Is that what used to be King Tears?
No,
Huh?
no.
They're
Remember
all-
now, this is a sample page.
Oh.
Okay, there's about 50 funeral homes in the full survey chart, which is about at least 5 pages long,
Okay.
on the online version. Okay, so we have a funeral home in our area that charges over $4,000 to do exactly the same thing that the $595 funeral home does. So I don't know anybody that says, oh, well, $3,500. So what? Kiss it goodbye. I've talked to a lot of people in a lot of areas of Austin, including some very exclusive areas. And by and large, those are the people that go like, I don't want to pay more than I have to because I would rather have my funds go to pay my granddaughter's tuition in Sophie Newcomb College. Yeah. Okay, so again, to go back to the booklet, the Federal Trade Commission says, shop before you drop. And that's right. And the funeral rule says, and believe me, I do this all the time. You can go with a friend, right? You pull up to the funeral home and you say to your friend who's driving, keep the motor running, I will be right back. Because the funeral rule says that a funeral home must provide you with their price list upon request. You just walk in, may I please have your current price list? They should have it in your hand in 2 minutes. Thank you very much. You're out. Okay, during COVID, we were fortunate that we also had some really good luck getting the price list as email attachments. But the funeral rule currently does not say that the funeral home must send you as an email attachment or put in the mail to you their price list. But if you show up in person, they must. The funeral rule also says they must give you their current prices over the phone. Oh. Okay, so those of you that don't want to go see the beautiful new Weed Corley Fish Event Center up Walk 2222 in Ropac, you can give them a call. But again, that comes down to you need to know what you want. You don't want to ask about the kinds of funeral service that you're not interested in. So get clear on that beforehand. All right, so that's why I gave you those. And then I love this chart. Nothing like patting myself on the back for this one. This dispositions chart, it kind of walks you through the various things and options that you have. I bet Rick printed it on a portrait.
Okay,
So-
I've got it.
He does. Okay, does everybody have this? I love this because it shows you, look at all the options that you may not be aware that you have. And of course, if you lived in some other states like Washington State or Oregon, you would have even more options because they do things like body composting. Have you heard of body composting? Have you read some articles?
Yep.
That's sort of like burial above ground. They put you in a pod and they put things that will cause your body to decompose and they stir it up and flip you.
Is that one, the green container at the curb?
Yeah. I want you to come to my LLI class because I always need someone, a frisky person like you in
Sorry.
the class to keep me on our toes.
Go ahead.
We're soon a sponsor for that kind of.
That's different. That's the parental.
Okay, that's a different one.
Oh, yeah, that's where, yeah, that's usually the most curious about the body match down in San Marcos. We have a whole session in the class on where you can donate your entire body if you feel inclined to do that. And of course, the body ranch or body farm down in San Marcos, people are fascinated by that. They basically are famous all across the country. People come there to study forensics anthropology and learn all. It's amazing what you can find out about like who a person was. Suppose you just find a body that's been in the wood stack for 6 months. Who was it? Was it a male or female? About what age? Oh, you'd be amazed the things that they can figure out based even on the skeletal structure and bones and just everything, right? Okay, but that's one of my favorite topics. May I not digress? Okay, so, and again, another option available in some, particularly in the West Coast states, is what's called aquamation, alkaline hydrolysis, where instead of cremating you with fire, they basically put you in a solution that breaks your body down. But that's not available, that's not legal here to be performed in the state of Texas.
James Bond.
Was it? Yeah, did you know Desmond Tutu, I believe, was Aquaman? So anyway, I only put on this sheet what is currently legal in Texas, or there would be even more. But that's why you have it, to give you the big overview. And then people so often ask about, should I buy a prepaid funeral contract? This is really important. And our prepaid funeral contracts are overseen by the Texas Department of Banking. And it's such a big, important topic that they actually created a whole separate website. If you just go out and you put in on Google, Texas prepaid funeral contracts, it will take you to the Department of Banking's specially created site, which is also mentioned on this handout. So there are some funeral homes in our area with deep pockets that can afford to treat you to lunch. And you will often get invitations from some of these. Neptune Society is one. Cook Walden is another that I have a collection of invitations. And Harold Funeral Home recently has gotten into reaching out into the community. And the language they use is really important because they talk to you in their come have lunch with us or whatever language about pre-planning. And that's what I've been talking to you about ever since we kicked off here. Pre-planning, giving it some thought while you still have your wits about you and you're not in a state of grief about your own impending passing or someone that you've lost. But invariably, once you get to the event, it can easily slide into prepaying. And it's just like buying a car. If I may come back with that. Lock in today's price, because have you ever seen anything do anything would go up? Well, every mistake that a consumer can make, my brother and I made those mistakes. When we planned our dad's funeral, we were a dream come true. We walked into this funeral home in Louisiana that we totally familiar with. It was recommended by relatives. And we walked in and we said, we have no experience planning funerals. And it was true. It's true. And we trust that you will guide us to have a funeral that will honor our. Okay. And here's another mistake. It didn't seem like it at the time. I went to a funeral home in my neighborhood. And they charged at that point $1,000 for a direct donation. And I don't know, that seemed reasonable to me. It did. So I went ahead and I bought a prepaid funeral contract. And there's two ways that prepaid contracts are funded, either what they call trust funded, or it's basically an insurance policy. So the next thing I know, it was easy pay, pay over 36 months or whatever it was affordable. And I got my contract from an insurance company and everything's good. And the insurance company changed ownership a few times, but that's okay. They informed me they did due diligence. And my policy never changed, incidentally. Well, so I thought $1,000 was really good. And when I first became a volunteer with our organization, $9.95 was the lowest price in town. So I was feeling really. But then I became involved with FCA, which used to be called AMBIS, Austin Memorial and Burial Information Society. And then came into town the more affordable options, and with the more affordable options, prices started to come down. And if you will go out and look at our full survey on our website, you'll see there are quite a few funeral homes that provide direct cremation for less than $1,000. And I found out about donating body option. And those body farm people down in San Marcos, believe me, they'll take almost anything. They will. They can take a body that has been autopsied. But I do want to tell you, because of the research that they do, to get registered with them, I have never seen such a long application. They want to know everything, like your work history, because your work history can affect your body. If you worked at a post office standing up selling stamps for 40 years, that's going to have an impact on probably your knees, hips, ankles, and spine, and who knows what else. They really want a full picture of you and your life and your medical conditions, all kinds of stuff. And they even want some photographs. So even though the body farm or body ranch, it's called the Freeman Ranch, is an appealing option with very few rule outs, the application process, just be aware that it's extensive. And your relatives will not know the answers to all the questions. I can promise you. Gosh, I digressed, didn't I? Okay, so I didn't know before I became involved with AMBIS about whole body donation options. And so I frankly decided myself, I want to go to the body farm. So guess what? It is always good to have a backup plan, just in case the group that you're registered with, for any number of reasons, your body at the time of your death is not acceptable. I mean, maybe it was like really looking good, but then it turns out instead of dying from what you thought you were going to die from, because maybe you had cancer or something like that, you were in a car wreck and now your body is a wreck, right? Disqualified. So I always tell people, if you want to do a whole body donation, do have a backup plan. So maybe I have like $595 set aside that, okay, if I'm contagious when I die, the body farm's not going to want me. So now we go back to an affordable direct cremation. But anyway, I just want you to know, as I stand up here, the well-meaning, planning ahead, everything that somebody typically might do that does not have the breadth of information that you can get from our organization, that's just what happens. Okay. One reason why you'll notice on the price chart We have a column for radius. How far in any one direction will the funeral home go before they start imposing an additional mileage charge? Well, look at that. I've never seen a figure lower than 20. 20, and this is one direction, not round trip. And I've seen some funeral homes that will actually go more than 35, not many. So that's why when we give you the address in the funeral home price survey, we don't give you the zip code. Don't feel you have to just shop right there in the neighborhood, because like I like to tell people, it's not like you're lining up a weekly bridge club, that the location where you're going to meet every Monday afternoon, it becomes really significant. You could save thousands of dollars by selecting a funeral provider that's 18 miles from where you live, but you're only going to go there once or twice. So it's good to know about the mileage radius. All right, so that's basically why you have the handouts that you have, and I'm not going to dig and game with you. Let's read them together. We will read the first half if they want, but we're really past that. What I'd like to do now is, does anybody have a little white card that they want to give us? With a question, or just call it out?
No, you're talking about fill out.
Oh, no, keep your card, you may want
I
to.
do have a question.
Yes.
Okay, this is both superficial and deep. Okay. If you use the terminology that there's no difference between a cremation at $495 and $4,000. If I ask the funeral director and realizing that his sales, could he justify the difference? Saying he gives you, whiter piece of the paper.
Right, they would say what they want.
I know that, but realistically,
Oh, yeah, I mean, we've had members go to the more expensive funeral homes. But they have the price list, right? And notice also, this is really important. The effective date of the price list is in a column on the survey. This is a massive project, to go out and pick these price lists up, and then, some of them, like, they'll give you the direct cremation charge, but they put the crematory fee somewhere else. And we want to make sure that the price you see on our price list includes everything. As they say in the car business, we want the out the door price. Don't suddenly surprise me with, oh yeah, well, it's true. We have the lowest direct cremation price of anybody in town, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, now let's see, under, there's the crematory fee. What? Now you're telling me that you're going to add the crematory fee, which is typically at least $495. No, you want to make sure, again, if you're calling around to some funeral homes to get some prices and you're interested in direct cremation, be sure to ask these 2 follow-up questions. Does that price you're giving me include the crematory fee?
Is that because they don't have their own cremation
Like
facility?
sometimes, yeah. Not every funeral home in town owns their own crematory, so they have to subcontract. And I've had people waffle a little bit. Well, it varies. Okay, so then I say, since I was not really raised in North Carolina, I'm a Yankee through and through, so it gives me a right to be a bit pushy. And I will follow up and say, well, I understand that, you may use different crematories and so forth, but if I were planning the funeral today, what would that price be? And then I get a figure and I use that for the crematory fee. So that's the first follow-up question for direct cremation. Does the price you've given me include the crematory fee? The second question is, does the price include at least 48 hours of refrigeration? because there's a law, Texas law, that says there's a 48-hour waiting period between the official time of death and when the cremation can occur. Why did grandma fall down the stairs? We've got 48 hours to settle that question. Okay, because once the body's cremated, things are pretty much over. Okay, so at least 48 hours of refrigeration should be included.
Nancy, on that
Yes.
question, about what you get, what warning you get for the 4,000 as opposed to 5,000.
Right.
Might something be that the facilities are much more beautiful? You're sitting on maybe a velvet couch talking to someone in a beautiful room, whereas in the lower priced ones, it's more of a,
Yeah,
just.
that's true.
It's overhead. It's overhead.
Yeah, but that's not your problem. I mean, some of them you can even arrange it electronically without even going in. They will just ask you, fax me this, fax me that. And I'll fax you this and get it signed and notarized and fax it back and so forth like that. So anyway, yeah, thank you kind of for bringing me back. I was coming back. So we've had representatives go into the funeral home and they had our price list. And then I mentioned the effective date is important because if you're going into the funeral home in November, remember, we pick those price lists up in January. Funeral homes can update their prices anytime they want, as often as they want. So you don't want to get into some kind of conflict that they give you one price and then our price list is something different. We've had that happen. If they give you a different price, you have a right, of course, to say, could you just give me the effective date of the price list that you're quoting from? And if it's different than what's on our survey, well, then it wouldn't be surprising that some of the prices are different. So we've had members go into some of the more expensive funeral homes and mention, well, I can get a lower price at, and they'll name one of the lower price funeral homes. And the response to that is, well, it's up to you if you want to go to a funeral home that's really cheap. Okay. You know, and of course, one of the most common sales things besides, have you ever seen prices go anywhere up, is this is your last chance to honor your mother. And from what you told me, she sacrificed a lot. So you could have the nicest prom dress, or you could have the nicest leather jacket when you were on a football team and so forth. And yes, I know you come in and you told me, even with a pre-need, yes, your mother had a pre-need and she selected a pine casket. This is called upselling. I'll bet your mother was a really modest person. But I'll tell you what, after all that she did for you during your life and hers together, don't you really, doesn't it just seem fitting that you should do something a little nicer for mom than a pine casket?
The bronze model.
Yes, the gold mahogany. Yeah, my brother and I, we made the mistake of telling the funeral director that my parents adored mahogany furniture. Mahogany is the most expensive wood casket there is. We didn't get one, but we could have. Yeah.
On your sheet, it says, most funeral homes no longer guarantee funeral costs for prepaid plans. So is that true? I mean, why are you prepaying that?
I know. I think it's just a good question to ask.
You mean they might say, oh, yes, you prepaid me
Yes.
for $1,000,
Right.
but now.
And that's $4,000.
Well, then there's no reason to get a prepaid, but what they can do is, okay, well, the casket selected at the time that the prepaid policy was purchased is no longer available. Okay, we do have and can provide a comparable casket that's still dusty rose. But the interior, the casket selected by your grandmother was a great interior But this Dusty Rose casket has a velvet interior, so there will be an additional charge for that.
What about fees for newspaper announcements and things like that? Are there other fees that they don't include in those contracts?
Yes, well, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because it's so easy if you have purchased a prepaid to say, especially as time goes on a bit, don't worry, honey, it's all taken care of. Well, there are certain things that cannot be taken care of. And one of them would be an obituary in the Austin American Statesman, for example. Well, the Austin American Statesman's obituary page is the most expensive page in the entire paper per column inch. I've seen paperwork where the family, they went with the $5.95 funeral home for a direct cremation, but the obituary cost over $800. It had 2 pictures, but they weren't big ones. Okay, so the funeral home will collect in some instances, if you're ready to get that obituary written and submitted, they will collect money for the death certificates, which are not covered. Some prepaid plans, they'll say a 1-free death certificate. But suppose because someone had investments in retirement this and charge accounts that, everybody wants to see a death certificate, right? Let's just say you need 20 to get it all done. And it's better to order a few more than to under order, because currently, and again, see, the price can vary. Suppose you get a pre-need, and today the death certificates are $21 for the first and $4 for each additional certificate ordered at the same time. Just think about that. The first one, 21, and then 5 for 20. I wouldn't try to trim it too tight, because if you come up one short 7 months from now, while you're still struggling to get everything settled, the first new death certificate, $21, unless the price is going up. So it's better to have a few more than what you may need than to under order and have to keep paying again. And then suppose you don't die for 17 years. I will bet you 17 years from now, the first death certificate will be more than $21. So death certificates and obituaries are not included. They just cannot be in a prepaid funeral contract. So you need to be aware of this before you say to your loved one, don't worry, honey, it's all taken care of. And then if you want cremation, there is a small fee, but it's worth mentioning. If you die in Travis County, it's where the death occurs, not where the funeral home is, okay? If you die in Travis County and you want to be cremated, the medical examiner has a $25 cremation permit fee. Again, this is collected by the, they pass it on to the medical examiner. Yes.
Right, back to Tom's question about, is there a difference in cremation prices? And so I've got a couple of questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
What does this have to be there, or one is cremated, or just to identify that it's the correct body there?
They do pretty good at tracking from the time they get you and they are told who you are and so forth. They have pretty good, all of the funeral homes, they have pretty good records about who's there and who's being cremated and stuff. But sometimes, especially, let's just say the decedent was a person experiencing homelessness. And so it's really helpful if they can find a family member to come in and say, yes, this is Joe Smith. But to actually witness the cremation, which can be an option, there's an additional charge for that.
Well, why I ask is, I know I had to identify my father in Dallas, this is 4 years ago.
Mhm.
And then I witnessed the cremation,
Mhm.
which was not great fun, but what I remember is I was required to do that.
I've not heard of a requirement. If it's a requirement, it doesn't seem like there should be an additional charge for it. That's sort of a forced purchase.
Yeah.
Now, some people want to press the button, okay? To initiate the cremation, but then once the cremation begins, there's nothing to see because it's all happening in the cremation chamber, which is totally not visible to the public.
Well, I have a follow-up comment. Well,
Sure.
this was Hillcrest Memorial Cemetery, which is very Dallas, very expensive.
Uh-huh,
And so he just went through, was cremated,
uh-huh,
and was with the urn.
yes,
And then this could have been a movie. We went, my son-in-law died now 7 or 8 years ago, and I was there with his parents. And we were in a crematory, an inexpensive crematory going west, I forget what
okay,
it
a
was.
different,
Yeah, different one.
different,
And so we get and they said, "Here, 10 o'clock on the button, so you could get Matt, and so there's a thing that grind. And grind. It went on for 20 minutes, and they were grinding Matt up in the territory. And I thought but that was just all, but so, I guess real expensive could be, you gotta stand there and watch it, or inexpensive could be, you have to sit there and hear it, so. I mean, not like cremation, I just don't want to be around when they're good.
right. Well, again, I cannot explain why you were required to be present during the cremation process.
Well, 50 years ago. So.
I know, but you didn't really witness it. You were just present in the funeral home while it was occurring.
No, I watched my dad go into the.
Okay, you saw him go in, but once the cremation began, there was nothing to witness. You're just looking at a cremation retort, which could be empty or not, right? Now, typically, once a cremation has occurred, there are large bone fragments, some rib cage and stuff like that. Whereas we're used to talking about ashes, right? So typically, after everything has cooled down, the bone fragments and everything, well, first of all, they go over everything with a magnet and they make sure that they get out those knee replacement joints. Okay, now, it used to be, and probably still, it's a good idea, pacemakers.
Yeah.
Now, I understand there are now some pacemakers that do not have lithium batteries in them. They're powered in a different way, but if a pacemaker has a lithium battery in it, it can blow up in the retort and do a lot of damage. But other things like artificial anything, gold fillings, which are really amalgam fillings, believe me, as the value of the gold goes up, the gold gets softer and softer. So you don't want 24-karat gold for your crown because you'll break it down in less than a week if you're a tooth grinder. You need something to make that gold harder. And the more other materials you have in it for that purpose, the lower the value. Plus, funeral homes will not pull teeth out for you. If you want somebody's gold crown, you have to hire a forensics dentist to come in and remove the teeth, and that hourly charge for that service will be higher than the value of the gold. People ask for it. No. So anyway, after they remove metal and all of that kind of stuff, and pretty much all they have left is bone fragments and stuff, they put it through a machine that pulverizes everything into what we think of as cremated remains or ashes. And I'm shocked that the funeral home called the family before the pulverizing process had occurred. Usually they got the nice cool pulverized ashes on the shelf before they would ever call the family. to come in and pick up the ashes and the death certificates and stuff. So you've had some really weird experiences. And I'm sorry for each and every one.
I made it, thank you.
Nancy, can you explain about that little metal tag in the company's truck?
At the time that- Yes, at the time.
time.
At the time that a body is transported to a crematory for that purpose, a metal tag that is highly fire resistant is attached to that person and stays with that person. It has a unique identification number on it that is entered into records all along the way. And when the family gets your cremated remains back, that metal tag will still be with the ashes.
They even put it in the retort while the
Mhm,
body was being.
Yes. Yeah.
Right there, put it on.
Yes. And even though people have been happily married for 78 years, they cannot be cremated together, by the way. I mean, just suppose an elderly couple were both killed in a car wreck. And it's such a romantic idea. Of cremating them together, but it's one by one by one.
You want to explain about people that are excessively heavy too, that's kind of interesting because. You know, how that works.
Yeah, people that are morbidly obese. You'll notice when you look at a funeral home price list, for direct cremation, you will see typically in that area on the price list, an additional charge for bodies that weigh over a certain amount. And that amount varies from funeral home to funeral home, but 250 could be more than 250, there will be a surcharge because the cremation has to be closely monitored by the crematory operator because we're talking about a lot of, frankly, fat on the body. The temperature in the retort needs to be raised and slowly.
Well, and I'd like to
Yeah.
add in as well that not all retorts can actually withhold that much weight. So it sometimes has to be shipped to a specialty retort, which can cost more money as well.
Yeah, I was told that, basically, for funeral homes that allow their retorts to cool down, some of them, who knows, they operate 24 hours a day, I guess that's.
There has to be some resting period, but for example, older people will usually be first, because it's heating up slower. Whereas somebody, you know, babies or anyone who's very petite might be in between or towards the end when it's starting.
Alex, I love having her with me because she worked in a funeral home, so she knows things.
That's good.
Yeah,
Well, you know, this is not a totally sinister business.
no, it's a very necessary.
This is, like you said, like selling used cars.
That's right. Oh, it's interesting, you stuck the word used in. All I said was I sold cars. I sold new cars. Although I had some memorable bad experiences with some of these cars.
So the equivalent of out the door is in the urn price.
Yes, or everything that needed, the basics that needed to be done. The pickup of the body, this is direct cremation, okay? You go get the body. That's called the removal fee. Or first call is another term for it. They take it to a refrigeration place where the body can be refrigerated. And I do want to mention, it's not so cold that they turn you into a popsicle. Okay, about what, 42 degrees? Does that sound about reasonable? 42 degrees, so you're pretty cool, as it were. You were cool in life and now you're cool when you're not alive anymore. So they keep you in refrigeration and they get your cremation schedule. They transport you to the crematory, which could be down the hallway, or it could be several miles away. Okay, but they get you to the crematory. They get that metal tag on you, so they know who you are. They cremate you. They process the remains into fine ashes that sort of look like kitty litter a little bit, do you think? Is that a good analogy? Aquamission here, so.
Yes.
Yeah, sort of like kitty litter, but whiter maybe, with a little borax in it, baking soda. And then they let that cool down and either they, the crematory could also include a basic container, which they may try to bump you up and get you to buy something for you, right? But the basic container, which you're gonna have, is the ashes are going to be in a plastic bag that's going to be sealed off at the top, and then the plastic bag is put into a rectangular shaped plastic box. I've seen green ones, brown ones, and black ones so far, but just basically it's a rectangular box, which they, with no, and you know, no lock or anything like that. Sometimes they then put the plastic box in a cardboard box that has printed on it temporary container. Yeah,
Can I add something?
yeah.
I had a friend recently whose father passed away, and they had it cremated. And the funeral home was very adamant that they had to have an urn. That temporary container is technically an urn.
Mhm.
They do not have, you as a consumer do not have to purchase an urn from the funeral home. You can find one from Costco, Amazon, you can use a cookie jar, really, it's up to you. But that was a big misunderstanding that his family was under the impression that they had to leave in order to get the remains back, that they had to have an urn. And that's
Mhm.
not true.
You will love the full funeral home price survey that's on our website, because the last 2 pages are money saving suggestions for consumers. And it stresses the point that you do not have to buy, if you want a casket or an urn. The funeral home is one source, but far from the only source. Costco, not in the warehouse, but online. Okay, Amazon, believe, you believe, of course, you do. They sell everything. They even sell a Breva. Yeah. So caskets and urns, and you have the option to buy, let's just go to caskets for a moment. You have legally the option to buy, or you can make, okay, for people who are into simpler things, you can make caskets and urns. There's diagrams all over the place. And some families find that very somehow rewarding, that they can do something to get involved and express their love and appreciation for the deceased person and the way they support the family. Anyway, the law says the funeral home must take delivery of merchandise purchased from this other source. And no, you don't have to be there to sign for the casket when it arrives. Now, again, it's just like buying a car. It's so true. It's like, okay, let's just say you see a casket at the funeral home, you really like how it looks, okay? And let's just say it's, just for the sake of the example, let's just say it's $5,000. But then you have this whiz kid grandkid that gets on the internet like in and they find a comparable, if not exactly the same. It's not $5,000, it's $3,850. Just like buying a car, you can say to the funeral home, we found another blue casket so very similar to this one here that I like, but gee, it's only $3,850. But you know, I'd really rather buy it from you, all things considered. The funeral home has plenty of negotiating room on those caskets. And I've heard wonderful stories about they match the price that you found online. Just like when Staples was still here in Austin, and I would go in there and I would say, I wanted this, but guess what, for the Amazon price. Huh, yeah,
Do they take credit cards?
of course.
Okay.
Mhm,
Tom, the question.
yeah.
Are there rules where you do have to have an embalming, like if you had a home funeral, and we're gonna have the body on display, obviously you wouldn't want that just chilled and things, but are there any rules that say they have to be embalmed?
No, the law says something must be done to slow down the decomposition of the body. Embalming is one option, and sometimes like with interstate commerce and flying on airplanes and stuff like that, you want to talk about when embalming is required?
So typically, if you're going outside of state lines, like if you were transporting a body from Texas to Oregon
On public transit.
on public transit, so not via car, airplane, you're more than likely gonna have to be involved. That's just the legislative rules that we have to follow. But if you are driving from Austin to Corpus Christi, you do not have to be refrigerated. Most you don't have to be embalmed. In most instances, you do not have to be embalmed. If you're traveling to a different country, more than likely. So it's really just the time when transporting bodies.
So the alternatives to embalming, we've talked about refrigeration, but most people, you're not, your freezer in the, in the garage. It's not large enough, it would be too complicated to try to take out what's already in there, so you can, put a human body in there, but there's dry ice. Okay, and there's also a product called Techni Ice. TECHNI ice that you can buy and put in the freezer. It's like those cool ice cubes they have now, that they're little plastic cubes. And you put them in the freezer and the water inside freezes, and then you put them in your drink and they cool the drink down just like ice, but they don't water the drink down because the water is kept in the little plastic ice cube shaped thing. And then when you're finished, you put them back in the freezer and freeze them again. It's the same thing like with Techni Ice, but something must be done within 24 hours to slow down the decomposition of the body.
Nancy, can you talk a little bit, and Alex, too, about, we haven't mentioned natural, funerals.
And then question.
Okay, let me ask you a question here. Okay,
Yeah.
where's the president?
I apologize for.
That's okay. I'm glad you came, and thanks for being here. Yes.
This is a serious. Do
Serious.
you have any experience with burial at sea?
Not personally, but I'm knowledgeable about it.
It is possible.
Oh, yes.
You saying that because I'm going on a cruise?
Oh, by the way, cruise ships do have morgues.
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I've seen them off boat bodies and body bags.
What's really interesting is if a body is buried at sea in a casket, they punch holes in the short end, not the long end, but the short end. They punch holes in it so that the casket will sink. Right.
Good idea. Your cremated remains can also be turned into a coral reef. But
Or diamonds.
Oh, yeah,
Hard glass.
it's amazing.
Thought in this space.
yeah,
There's also a biodegradable cremation urns for burial that they will biodegrade in the ground and also biodegrade. If you want to just say, you want to go down to South Padre Island and go out in the boat, and you have, instead of, it's very windy and you go like, this could be risky. Releasing the ashes, the last thing you want to have happen is them blow on you. But some people just keep them in a water soluble biodegradable urn. And they just put the urn in the water and over a period of time it biodegrades.
Nancy, thank you so
Oh,
much.
you're
I
welcome.
know that you have more information, but we also have heard of Paul.
Yeah,
if we have information, a lot of knowledgeable folks here. I want you to know that I called you ahead of this, and I happen to have a friend whose sister was looking, who lives out of state, was looking for information for her sister. And she had some wrong information, and when I sent her this, she said, oh, this really does answer my question. So it is very useful information.
Thank you.
I thank you very much.
Okay.
So if somebody has a question,
Chat.
no.
Okay. If you would like, think you might be interested in joining, our FCA as a member. I can give you a list of all the cool stuff that you will get in the membership packet if anybody would like to have it. Yay,
Orange is for minutes, okay.
okay, anybody else?
Well, I changed it one time, but I moved flat.
You'll be teaching the class.
Yes.
Law. By Alex.
Oh, I.
Yeah. They're down in Washington.
Nancy, one over here.
Yes.
So if anyone wants to take them for your friends,
Hmm?
if anybody wants to take any for your friends.
Be warned, we put a lot of credence in advance directive documents.
We just had a
Medical
program on,
care.
we just had a program on that last week.
Yeah, do you have any, I told, do you have any questions about the forms that Shirley Price discussed with you last Friday? Because I teach advanced directives as part of the class at LLI, so I'm pretty knowledgeable about the medical directives that Shirley talked to you about. Did you have any questions after the fact?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, well, our phone number and email address is all over.
That's too.
I can. I even have a print. Well, okay, thank you for coming.
Thanks for coming down.